Number 8. Healing begins not with drastic change, but with gentle awareness. The first step is recognizing the patterns in your life, not with judgment or shame, but with curiosity. Begin asking yourself, when did I learn to act this way? Or who taught me that I had to be this small to feel safe? These patterns, people-pleasing, overthinking, withdrawing, weren't born from weakness. They were your nervous system's way of surviving what felt overwhelming at the time. Now that you're here, awareness opens the door to inner child work. This isn't about digging up the past to stay stuck in it. It's about honoring the younger version of you, the one who adapted, who kept going, who survived without the tools they needed. You can reparent yourself now. Offer that inner child the validation, safety, and love they didn't receive. Permission to rest, to cry, to say no. If possible, seek support. Trauma is not something you need to untangle alone. Therapies like EMDR, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems can help your body and brain reprocess what's been stuck. And even if therapy isn't accessible to you right now, healing is still possible. Surround yourself with safe relationships, people who listen, people who respect your boundaries. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in connection. Bit by bit, you learn to feel safe with others and with yourself. And finally, healing is found in the small, quiet moments. Taking deep, conscious breaths when you feel overwhelmed. Journaling your thoughts instead of stuffing them down. Putting your bare feet on the ground to reconnect with the present. Saying, "I need a break," without guilt. These small acts are not insignificant. They are rebellions against the idea that you must always endure. You're allowed to feel safe. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to heal. Number 7. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't scream. They go silent. If you've ever struggled to name your feelings, it might not be because you're emotionally unaware, but because you were never given the space to feel in the first place. Maybe growing up, no one asked you how you felt. Or maybe when you did express emotion, you were ignored or even punished. So over time, you learn to disconnect from your feelings, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. You became numb, not because you don't care, but because caring once hurt too much. This numbness often shows up in ways we don't even notice. Hours spent scrolling on your phone, binge-watching shows late into the night, always needing noise in the background, anything to avoid the silence. These habits aren't just distractions, they're shields, subconscious ways to avoid facing what's buried beneath the surface. Because when emotions have been unsafe for so long, avoiding them feels like survival. And then there's the struggle with boundaries. Maybe you say yes when you want to say no. You allow others to cross lines, not because you don't see it, but because deep down, you were taught that your needs didn't matter. That love had to be earned, that saying no would make people leave. But none of that is true. Suppressing your emotions, your needs, your voice, it may have helped you survive, but it's not the way to truly live. You're not broken for shutting down. You're not weak for avoiding pain. You adapted. You did what you had to do. And now, you get to unlearn, bit by bit, gently. You get to rediscover what you feel. You get to set boundaries without guilt. You get to come back home, to yourself. Number 6. Sometimes trauma doesn't show up as a breakdown. It hides in your daily routine, in your schedule, in the way you work. For many people, overworking isn't ambition, it's survival. If you tie your sense of worth to productivity, if resting makes you feel guilty or lazy, that might not be a mindset problem. That might be trauma. Maybe you grew up in an environment where love had to be earned, where being useful was the only way to be noticed. So now, even as an adult, you push yourself to exhaustion, not for success, but for a sense of being enough. Then, there's the part of you that never asks for help, not because you don't need it, but because at some point in your life, help simply wasn't there. Or worse, asking for help led to rejection, ridicule, or punishment. So, you learned to carry everything alone. You became self-reliant, not out of confidence, but out of fear. And while independence can be a strength, the inability to lean on others can become a quiet, isolating burden. You might also notice how easily you get startled. Loud sounds, sudden movements, even someone calling your name unexpectedly. That jumpiness? That's not just being sensitive. That's a nervous system that's been trained to stay on high alert. When your environment was unpredictable or unsafe, your body adapted by becoming a scanner, constantly watching, constantly ready. And now, even when the danger is gone, your body hasn't gotten the message. And perhaps most quietly, but most painfully, there's the voice in your head that won't stop criticizing you. The one that says you're not doing enough, not good enough, not strong enough. That inner critic isn't your voice. It was planted there, maybe by a parent, a teacher, or years of being told that who you were wasn't okay. Over time, you internalize that voice, and now you carry it with you like truth. But it's not truth. It's trauma echoing through your thoughts. These patterns might seem normal, but normal doesn't always mean healthy. And recognizing them is not about blame, it's about compassion. These habits were once ways to cope, to survive, to protect yourself. But today, you deserve more than survival. You deserve freedom. You deserve peace. You deserve to rest without guilt, ask for help without fear, feel safe in your body, and speak to yourself with kindness. Number 5. Trauma doesn't just affect how we feel. It shapes how we love. Often, without realizing it, we find ourselves in relationship patterns that echo the very pain we're trying to escape. One of the most common patterns is being drawn to emotionally unavailable people. Even though we say we want deep, safe, consistent love, our nervous system may crave what's familiar, not what's healthy. If you grew up around inconsistency, distance, or coldness, you may unconsciously seek out partners who offer the same. Because unpredictability feels normal, it feels like home, even if it hurts. Then there's the tendency to sabotage healthy relationships. When someone comes along who treats you with kindness, respect, and patience, it can feel unsettling, unfamiliar, and sometimes even threatening. You might start picking fights, pulling away, or convincing yourself that something is off, not because it is, but because your brain has learned that love means chaos, so peace feels boring, and safety feels suspicious. This is not self-sabotage for the sake of drama, it's a trauma response. Your body is trying to protect you from something that doesn't exist anymore. Another painful but very real pattern is swinging between extremes, becoming overly attached too quickly, or detaching just as fast. It's rooted in the fear of abandonment, or the fear of being consumed. You might cling tightly to someone, hoping they won't leave, or push them away the moment things get too close. It's not because you don't want love, but because love has always come with conditions, confusion, or pain. You're trying to stay safe in a space that once felt dangerous. And sometimes, instead of relating to others as equals, you become the caretaker, the fixer, the therapist. You take responsibility for everyone's emotions, solve their problems, and lose your own identity in the process. Maybe growing up, you were the emotional support in your family, so now you believe your value comes from how much you can give, not from simply being yourself. But love isn't a job. You don't need to earn it by over-functioning. You deserve relationships where you're not just needed, but known. Where you're not just helping, but also held. These patterns are not flaws. They are not failures. They are trauma echoes, repeating what was once necessary to survive. But now, you're allowed to choose something different. you're allowed to unlearn, to pause, to love from a place of wholeness, not wounding. Healing in relationships is possible, and it starts with awareness and self-compassion. Number 4. Control is often misunderstood. From the outside, it might look like perfectionism, stubbornness, or micromanaging, but beneath that surface, control can be a trauma response. If you grew up in a chaotic or unpredictable environment, you might have learned early on that the only way to feel safe was to take control. When nothing around you felt stable, you created your own sense of order by being the one who held everything together. And that instinct didn't disappear with age. It followed you into adulthood, into your relationships, into your work. You might now feel the urge to plan every detail, double-check everything, and make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Not because you're controlling by nature, but because uncertainty once meant danger. Micromanaging becomes a survival strategy. You may feel like you're the only one who can do things the right way. Letting others take over feels risky, even threatening. If someone makes a mistake, it doesn't feel small, it feels like a trigger. And often, you won't say it out loud, but deep down there's a voice whispering, "If I don't take care of this, everything will fall apart." That's not ego, that's the child in you who had to grow up too fast, who had to be the responsible one when no one else was, and now, that part of you is still trying to protect you, even when you no longer need it to. It's not just about tasks, it's about trust. When you've had your trust broken too many times, by people who were supposed to protect or support you, it becomes harder to rely on anyone else. You may struggle to delegate, even in small things, because surrendering control feels like inviting disappointment, or worse, pain. So, you tell yourself it's easier to just do it alone, but deep down, it's lonely, exhausting, and it reinforces the same belief that you're the only one you can count on. The truth is, this need for control was never about power. It was about safety. It was about survival. And now, it's time to soften that grip, not all at once, but slowly, gently. You can begin to trust again. Yourself, your body, the people who've shown consistency. You can begin to let go. Not because everything is guaranteed to go perfectly, but because perfection was never the goal. Safety is. Peace is. And you're allowed to find that peace without having to hold everything together. Number 3. Avoidance is one of the most misunderstood trauma responses, because on the outside it can look like disinterest, laziness, or even selfishness. But in reality, avoidance is a survival strategy. It's your mind and body trying to protect you from pain that once felt unbearable. Maybe you avoid emotional closeness, not because you don't want to be loved, but because somewhere along the way, vulnerability became dangerous. Perhaps when you opened up in the past, it was met with rejection, punishment, or abandonment. So now, even if you crave connection, your body pulls away the moment things get too close. You might ghost people, keep conversations surface level, or create distance without fully knowing why. It's not because you're cold. It's because your nervous system has learned that intimacy equals risk. Or maybe you avoid responsibility, not because you don't care, but because mistakes used to come with harsh consequences. Maybe you were shamed for messing up. Maybe you were never allowed to fail safely. So now, taking initiative feels scary. Stepping up feels like setting yourself up for punishment. You might downplay your abilities, avoid leadership roles, or freeze when faced with pressure, not out of incapability, but because your past taught you that being seen is dangerous. And then, there's the avoidance of joy. It sounds strange, but it's real. When life has conditioned you to expect the worst, even good things can feel threatening. If you grew up in chaos, moments of happiness may have always been followed by something painful, so now, Joy triggers anxiety. You brace yourself, waiting for something to go wrong. You sabotage good things, not because you want to, but because you've learned that feeling safe isn't actually safe. It's unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels dangerous. And maybe the most common yet misunderstood avoidance response, procrastination. You've probably called yourself lazy, but you're not lazy, you're overwhelmed. Your mind is trying to protect you from failure, pressure, or expectations that once felt crushing. That avoidance is not about being careless, it's about fear. A fear that was planted long ago and now shows up every time you face something new, difficult, or important. All of this avoidance, whether it's with people, responsibility, joy, or tasks, is your nervous system's way of saying, I don't feel safe. Yourself with compassion, and you begin the slow, gentle process of returning to safety, not by forcing yourself to change, but by showing your body and your heart that it's okay now. You're allowed to feel close. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to feel joy. And yes, you're allowed to begin. Number 2. Have you ever caught yourself always saying yes to others, even when you really want to say no? Maybe you avoid conflict at all costs because the thought of disagreement feels unbearable. This pattern is called people-pleasing, or in trauma psychology, the fawning response. It's a way your mind learned to keep you safe by trying to be so agreeable and accommodating that no one sees you as a threat. When you're fawning, you're essentially trying to avoid danger by making yourself less noticeable or less likely to upset others. Over time, this can look like a personality trait, but it's really a survival strategy that developed from trauma. Then, there's overthinking. The endless loop of analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment. If you find yourself stuck in your head, trying to predict every outcome and scenario, it's not just anxiety or being a worrier. It's your brain's way of trying to stay safe in an unpredictable world. When your early experiences taught you that the unexpected could be dangerous, your mind learned to prepare for all possibilities. Overthinking becomes a shield, a way to prevent getting caught off guard again. Perfectionism might seem like a high achiever's habit, but for many it's deeply connected to trauma. If mistakes were met with harsh criticism, rejection, or even punishment growing up, then the idea of making a mistake feels unsafe. To avoid that pain, you push yourself to meet impossible standards. You strive to be flawless, thinking that if you can just be perfect, you'll finally be safe, accepted, or loved. But perfectionism isn't about excellence, it's about control and protection. Another response you might recognize is constantly being on edge. Imagine never truly being able to relax, always feeling tense, alert, and ready for disaster. This is called hypervigilance. It's like your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, scanning for threats that may or may not be there. When your early environment was unsafe or unpredictable, your body learned to stay awake and alert all the time, so danger wouldn't sneak up on you. Even when the danger is gone, your body can still be wired this way. Finally, there's the fear of being a burden. You might find yourself apologizing for everything, even things you don't need to apologize for, like taking up space or simply existing. This feeling often comes from growing up in an environment where your needs were dismissed, or where expressing yourself felt like a problem for others. You've internalized the idea that you don't deserve attention or care, so you try to minimize your presence to avoid burdening those around you. All of these responses, people-pleasing, overthinking, perfectionism, hypervigilance, and fear of being a burden, can feel like part of who you are, but they're not your personality. They're survival strategies your mind and body developed to keep you safe in difficult situations. Recognizing them is the first step toward healing and learning how to respond differently, with more freedom and peace. Number 1. So, what exactly is trauma? Many people think trauma only means big, shocking events, like accidents or disasters. But it's much more than that. Trauma can come from neglect, emotional abuse, bullying, growing up in a chaotic environment, or simply feeling unsafe for a long time. It's not just the big moments that leave a mark. Sometimes it's the small, ongoing experiences that wear us down from the inside. There are different types of trauma to know about. Acute trauma, which happens from a single intense event. Chronic trauma, which involves repeated or ongoing stressful experiences. And complex trauma, which usually happens when the trauma comes from relationships, like ongoing abuse or neglect from people we depend on. When we face trauma, our bodies react automatically with survival mechanisms: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. These are natural responses designed to protect us in dangerous situations, even if those dangers happened long ago or aren't obvious anymore. Understanding these responses helps us see that what feels automatic or just how we are might actually be our body and mind trying to keep us safe.